always, if you are new here, welcome. If you've been before, welcome back. Okay, we are here for another book review, another series review. We are going to be talking about the Empyrean series today. So, Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. Y'all know I am back in my fantasy era. I just reviewed the whole ACOTAR series, and I am so excited to talk about this one. So, this is another fantasy series. It is another romantasy series. It is another samati series. Okay, right up my alley. There are 2 books so far in this series. Just like always, the beginning of the video, I am not going to share any spoilers. We're just going to give like general overview of the 2 books. Can I give you a taste of what's in them? If you're on the fence about reading them or looking for a new fantasy series to read, I'm going to tell you exactly why you should read these. And then a little later in the video, I will give a big spoiler alert when I'm about to start deep diving into these books. And if you haven't read them or you don't want to know what happens in them, don't watch any further. Okay? So we're going to start with Fourth Wing. So there are 2 books in this series. These are by Rebecca Yarros. All right, so they were both released in 2023. So this is a very new series on the market, which I love. So far there are 2. Fourth Wing is the first one. Iron Flame is the second. Okay, so what I love about both of these books is that they are action-packed really from start to finish. They have a really strong female lead, really strong male lead, really strong supporting characters. I think that the entire world that's built in these books is really, really fun. It's a little different than ACOTAR. They're actually humans in this book, which is fun. I will say though, like, I loved both of them. I thought Fourth Wing was really, really good, but having read Iron Flame now, this book is so much better than Fourth Wing. I think one of the things about fantasy series, especially when it comes to like the first book in a series, is that like so much groundwork has to be laid. Like we have to really set the field and like set the story, and there's a lot of history that kind of has to be learned, that kind of so you can understand the world that we're talking about. And that's kind of what was happening in Fourth Wing, was there was just like so much of the stage was being set and so much of the storyline was being set into place that I thought it was good, and it definitely heats up towards the end of the book for sure. But y'all, Iron Flame is phenomenal. I could not put this book down. It is action from cover to cover. It is steamy. It is fun. It is, you learn a lot about like the intricacy of the world and like some of the concepts going on in the book. Like you learn a lot about that in this book. I thought this one was so good. Now, obviously, I can't talk about the characters without giving too much away, but as I said, I think that all of the leads in this book are really, really strong. I don't dislike any of them. I think that there's a lot of character evolution that happens in this book. I genuinely like the characters, which I can't always say about every series that I read. Sometimes I read a series and I'm like, ugh. Like, I just don't like the lead. Like, I just don't think that he or she is, like, all that great. And it kind of will put a damper on the story for a little while. But I will say that, like, these books, I like the lead characters off rip. I think that they're really, really great. Like I said, I just read the full ACOTAR series, and I was looking for another fantasy read. And these books, if you like the ACOTAR series, if you like Moss's style of fantasy, then you will really, really like these books. Cannot recommend them enough. I also think that it's really fun that the series is not finished yet. So these both came out in 2023, and the next book is scheduled to come out at the end of 2024. I will say that ending Iron Flame, oh my God, the cliffhanger that she leaves you on at the end of that book, and then realizing that you then have to wait an entire year for the next one, oh, it's tough. It's really, really tough. It's a tough realization, but I am super excited that the series is not over. It gives me something to look forward to. Apparently she is commissioned to do 5 books so far in this series, so we have at least another 3 on the way, which is wild. There is so much that we still don't know. There are so many questions that I still have. There's so many loose ends, and I think that that's really, really fun. It's a very intricate world that she's created. There's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of different characters that come into play in Iron Flame. I just think that there's a lot that we don't know yet, and I think that that's really, really interesting. I cannot recommend these books enough, and like I said, if you are a fantasy girl, if you are a romantasy reader, if you like a little bit of smut, these are a really, really good series to get started on. Okay, here we are. Spoiler alert. Okay, if you have not read this series, if you do not want to know what happens in this series, if you do not want any spoilers on either book, do not watch any further. If you want to listen about one of the books and not the others, be sure to pay attention to the chapters that are linked in the description below. I do go book by book. So if you've read Fourth Wing but not Iron Flame and you want to listen about Fourth Wing, just listen in that section of the video, okay? This is my fair warning. There are spoilers moving forward, all right? So let's talk about Fourth Wing, all right? Like I said, with most fantasy books, I feel like there's a lot of stage setting that has to happen in the first book, and that is definitely what took place in Fourth Wing. I didn't dislike that. I didn't even know that Fourth Wing wasn't as good as it could have, or that it wasn't as good as, until I read Iron Flame, right? Like when I was just reading Fourth Wing, I was like, this book is so good. And then I read Iron Flame and I was like, fuck, no, that book is so good. Okay, so like it's a good book. I just feel like there's, you know, you don't really get into Violet and Xaden's romantic storyline until later in the book. And obviously I love that Yarros like didn't make it seem obvious the whole time. Like obviously he was in play and like he was obviously giving the bad boy lead energy, but there was also Dane that was in the picture. And like there was definitely, he pissed me off though. I will say this, Dane's character, again, love the character evolution of Dane. I love what ends up happening with his character, but oh my God, he was the worst in Fourth Wing. Like the way that he spoke to her, the way that he made her feel this small, the way that she was like never good enough in his eyes and was never going to be enough in his eyes. Like it, God, I hated him. I hated his character in this book. But one thing that I did love about this was I loved that Violet's character was such a strong lead off rip. Like she was never the damsel in distress character. Like she was always, granted she wasn't strong at first, she wasn't capable at first, but she was like, I'm here and I'm gonna do this. And I loved that. Like I absolutely loved that she wasn't whiny, she wasn't complaining, she wasn't like, I need help all the time. She was there, and if she was gonna be there, she was gonna do it to the best of her ability. And I absolutely loved that part of the book. Y'all, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I am obsessed with Xaden. I love how his character was portrayed in the first book. I love that he was just like from afar, like we just kind of got to meet him from afar. He was so mysterious. He was so bad boy. He was so strong. He's like, his Signet is sick. Like he was just such a mysterious character for so much of Fourth Wing, and I really, really liked that. The mental image that I have of him is like, oh, he's everything, right? And I love that it was a slow progression. Like we really got to see their story evolve over the book, and the way that it ties into things that happen in Ironclaw, and you just like pieces of the story come together. Iron Flame. So much of the story comes together in that way, and I really enjoyed the progression of their romantic side of the relationship. I also love the world that Yarros has created. I like that they're humans. I like that magic is involved and dragons. Like, I think that it's such a fun, it's not so far-fetched fantasy that it doesn't feel relatable. Like the way that she writes this book is super conversational and uses a lot of the same language that we use today, which I think is really interesting. It makes it feel super relatable. and just super casual, and I like that, even though the world is definitely a fantasy world. It makes you feel like it's more attainable, right? And I think that that is a super fun touch. I will also say that the way that this book ended, with Brennan coming back into the picture, blew my mind. I did not see that coming at all. I love when a book actually genuinely surprises me. A lot of times, like, you can go back and reread, or like you can pick up on hints as you're reading that something is about to happen, that something big is about to happen. I did not see that coming at all. I honestly didn't even see the revolution part of it coming. Like, I didn't see that there was this whole hidden, like, Aricia. I didn't expect that. I didn't realize, like, I knew that Xaden was up to something. I knew that there was something going on, but I didn't expect for it to be this, like, uprising. I didn't see that coming at all. And then for Brennan, for him to be, like, the final, like, paragraph of the book, I was just like, oh, so well done. And having said that, that is what leads me to Iron Flame. The minute that this book was done, I immediately opened up Iron Flame because of the way this one ended. Like, I needed to know what was happening. I needed to know what was going on. I needed to understand, like, I needed the next chapter, right? Which leads me to talk about Iron Flame. This book was so good. I read this, like, I could not put this book down. I read it so fast. I literally would get done with work and immediately open up this book. It's all I did on the weekends. Like, I just absolutely loved it. Like I said, action from cover to cover. If you thought that the world was intricate in Fourth Wing, it gets super intricate in Iron Flame. There's a lot of details about the different types of, like, griffins versus dragons, and, like, the Empyrean, and how dragons and humans relate versus how griffins and humans relate, and how, like, flyers relate to riders, and the magic of the wardstone. Like, there's just so much intricacy to the story in this book. There were a couple times where I really had to, like, stop and go back and reread because I just didn't understand how different things tied together. And a lot of it had to do with the magic, and, like, when runes came into play, and, like, how that all works. Like, there was quite a few times. It wasn't a difficult read. It wasn't a bad thing. It was just one of those things where I was like, damn, she really put some thought into this world that she's created. She really put some thought into how A, B, and C come together and, like, triangulate, and how it all makes sense. Like, it's a very cool world that she's created, and that really comes to fruition in Iron Flame. I think one of my favorite parts about this book, and really maybe just the way that Yarros writes in general, is I love that when realizations start to happen for characters, or when pieces of the puzzle start to fit together, she doesn't just automatically give us the answer. She will let that realization linger for a little while in the book, and it gives the reader time to, like, actually think through the scenarios in their head and come up with hypotheses, or, like, what they might think might happen. Like, there were quite a few times in the book where, like, a realization would start to happen, and I would be like, hold on, what? Like, what does that mean? What are they trying to hint at right now? What am I missing? Like, I was trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together on my own, and I like that she gave us that time in the book. She didn't just immediately blurt out the answer and, like, make all of the pieces fit together. Like, she gives the reader time to, like, really digest it and, like, come up with their own theories, and I loved that. So it happened for me a couple times in the book, like when she was translating the journals, and, like, the first time that it didn't work, and then the second time when it partially worked, and then the third time when it didn't work and they figured out that it had to be 7, and that Ardania, how do you say that dragon's name? Adarania, the little dragon, when they figured out that she was the 7th dragon, like, it took time for all of that to evolve, and it really made me have to sit back and think about like, okay, like what does this mean though? Like if this isn't working and this is what the journal's hinting at, then what does that mean? Like who is the seventh dragon? Is it a person? Is it another dragon species? Like I really loved that aspect of the book. It also happened when she was figuring out that Xaden had his second Sinye. And like they had already told us, and I think she told us in Fourth Wing that Spegel, Xaden's dragon, had bonded within his familial line. But then the way that it slowly progressed in Iron Flame, and like she's figuring out that like when she had that realization, and they didn't talk about it again for another like chapter or two, and she's like trying to figure out what his Sinye is, and like she's like, what is your second Sinye? And then they're like going back and forth, and just like it had me hooked, because I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that like that's the realization that she was coming to, was that Spegel had bonded his grandfather and therefore he would have a second Sinye. But why is no one talking? Why can't he tell anyone about his second Sinye? And oh my God, like is it something deadly? Is it something that I need to be working about? Is he using it on me? Why would they kill him for his Sinye? Oh, they would kill him for his Sinye because the only one that they kill for is being an intrinsic. Like just the way that it evolves had me so hooked. It was really, really good. And I like the way that she writes. Like that's a reoccurring theme in the way that she writes, is that like she lets it linger and she lets the reader theorize about what's going to happen. And I really, really like that. I also love that they brought her mom back into the fold. I figured that she was going to play a role at some point. I just didn't know to what degree. And I do love that she tied it together in that way, that the only way that her mom would go would be to save the lives of her children. I absolutely love that. The only thing that made me sad was that her and Brennan never actually got to have a conversation. Like the two times that she saw Brennan still being alive, he wanted nothing to do with her. And like that makes me sad, because like, did she deserve it? Yeah, maybe, but like I just feel like there was so much more of the story there, and I feel like that's maybe part of the problem, is that I feel like we didn't get to learn enough about General Sorrengal and why she did what she did and like the thought process around it. And I just feel like there maybe could have been like a conversation there between like her and Brennan, or her and all three of them, of just like, this is why this all happened the way that it happened. But nonetheless, I love that she came in and like saved the day. I thought that that was a really good touch to the story. Last but not least, y'all, the way that this book ended, I cannot handle it. Talk about a cliffhanger. The ending of this book threw me for such a loop. I figured that they would win the battle, but I did not see Xaden turning into a Venin. Like I did not see that coming from a mile away. And honestly, when I read it, I had to reread it 3 times. I had to reread those last 2 chapters 3 times to try and like actually wrap my head around why that just happened. And it took me a couple reads to realize that like the sage was threatening to burn him out and then take all of Violet's power and kill her, which would in turn kill the 2 dragons as well. And so I feel like what happened was, like, in an effort to keep that from happening, he was trying to channel power in whatever way he could. And in doing that, he killed the sage, but he turned in that process. I don't think that it was done on purpose. I don't think that he like consciously gave up his soul to become a Venin in order to save Violet. I don't think that he intended for that to happen. I just like did not see it coming at all. When he turned to her and his eyes were red, no, that threw me for a loop. And honestly, initially, like off rip, I was mad because I love Xaden so much, and like the thought of him becoming the enemy, I can't handle that. Like I can't handle that at all. But then for the final chapter to be from Xaden's point of view and realize that like she went back with him, they were in bed together that morning, like to realize like, okay, everything might be okay. Like, I don't know her reaction, how this is going to be. I don't know how this is all going to play out, but she went home with him. So that was like, that made me like, okay. When we talk about like what's gonna come next, I think that there's some really interesting kind of theories out there. Obviously, I think that the third book is going to be centered around finding a cure for Xaden. I think that there has to be a cure, right? Like he can't be the enemy. But also like Jack Barlow was able to hide being a Venin for months. So I'm wondering if it's going to be common knowledge that Xaden is a Venin, or if this is going to be something that him and Violet are battling in private, trying to find a cure. I don't really know how that's gonna play out. I really think that Violet's gonna have a second Senye, especially since Ardanya, I need to figure out how to say that dragon's name, but especially since she is finally now able to breathe fire and she is actually coming into like her full mature self, I think Violet's gonna have a second Senye. And I'm wondering if it is also going to be some type of intrinsic power, because she's having these dreams, these weird dreams where like she can see, she had a dream about the sage stealing her power, right? Like she foresaw that. I'm wondering if she is able to see the future in some way, possibly, or if she's able to, I don't know. I think that there's some connection between possibly her second Senye and the dreams that she's having. So those are kind of my like big predictions for the next book. I think it's going to be about finding a cure for Xaden. I think we're going to see possibly Violet's second Senye really come into play. I'm interested to see how they handle Xaden's second Senye and his being a Venin, and like how that's going to play out in the public eye. I think it's all super interesting, and I am so excited to continue reading these books. Again, we have to wait until the end of 2024, which is so sad to me. But nonetheless, I love them, cannot recommend them enough. I am currently starting the Throne of Glass series, which is so exciting. I will be continuing to do these book reviews, both short form and long form videos. So please be sure to follow me on TikTok, subscribe to this channel, follow my Instagram. Thank you guys so much for coming to hang out, and I will see you back next time.